What's up? Travel Chronicles, and welcome to the final chapter. And I wasn't sure how this whole thing was going to end, where I was going to end it, right? Like I was going to do 100 first, and then it didn't seem quite right. But now I've gotten to the point where it's kind of time to end it. And the reason it's time to end it is because this is an opinion type vlog, if you will. Trying to get my opinions, my thoughts down as things were happening during the pandemic, from essentially March, February of 2020 till right now, end of September 2022. So COVID-19 started in September, around there. I mean, it was like I think they've traced it back to that point now of 2019. So we're 3 years into whatever that was, essentially. And it's not only is it enough, but some of the other commentaries I made, YouTube's actually come back and given me a strike for another video. Like, they gave me a strike once because I talked about vaccines, but whatever. I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, I think further out, 5-10 years, when we look back at the data, we'll be able to honestly say stuff. But right now, anytime you say something about it, if you're not encouraging it, then you're spreading misinformation, which to me is not fair and is a form of censorship, but it is what it is. But the reason I got this strike this time was because I was talking about the election from 2020. Right? So that first year, there was a lot of stuff going on. You're getting introduced to the pandemic. You've got a presidential election. And then, Trump lost. But there was a lot of controversy because the pandemic had kept people from voting face-to-face. A lot of people mailed in ballots. So you had a lot of stuff coming in from the outside that was counting towards the election. And I had made a video right after January 6th, so like the 8th or 9th, somewhere in there, whatever that next week is, and it got flagged because I was promoting misinformation about the election. Okay. The only things that I'll say, that I'll reiterate here, that I don't think I can get flagged for, is that the whole thing for January 6th was ludicrous, number one, because what they were doing, the process was, you have your election, you have the electoral college, and then January 6th, I don't know if it's like the 6th or like some, the first Thursday in January, or however they happen to work. But, they come in that day and they verify, the electoral college essentially votes that day, the Congress verifies the vote, and that's when the president's actually named. So you have the election in November, but the president's actually not named until January. And 2 weeks later, you have the inauguration, and then you have a new president. So the whole thing that Trump had done was right around that verification process. And the only things that I said, and I think I can say this, I don't know if I can or not, but it's verifiable, okay? There were some odd voting tendencies in states that had Senate elections and the presidential elections that were swing states. So, and you can go back and look, Georgia and Michigan, and I believe the split in Georgia was the Republican senator got more votes than Trump did, right? And it was and won. And then somehow it had gotten flipped for the presidential election, and Biden had gotten, I think it was 100,000 in Georgia more, and then in Michigan, I want to say the Democrat won, but I can't remember. Like, one of those places, Democrat won, the senator. And then Biden had gotten 70,000 more votes than Trump, but the difference in the senator election was only 7,000. And I think he got maybe 7,000 more votes, but Biden got 70,000. And then in Georgia, Trump got 1,000 less than the senator, but Biden got 100,000 more than the senator. And it was just like, I don't understand the thought process in these two particular swing states where someone is going to be like, I want the Democratic president, but I don't want him to have a Democratic Congress or, Senate. I don't want him to be able to work with anybody to pass anything. It's like they're intentionally voting for gridlock. But the total discrepancy was like there was an extra 100,000 votes for president, which I guess is possible. But if you look at some of the other states, there actually wasn't that big a discrepancy. So it was very odd voting. But the key fact was, I said, it doesn't matter if there was fraud or not. Okay, like understand, like I hope the algorithm catches this, because I know it wasn't reviewed by a person. That was the other thing that made me mad, because they're clearly just looking for words together in a sentence. But the fraud would never ever come out. So there's no fraud. There can't be, because nobody's going to come out and say that there was. The FBI, the CIA, NSA, like all these groups can go in there, investigate all these numbers, can run all these numbers to determine exactly what happened, and it could come out with a conclusion. Now, if they come out with a conclusion that, well, yeah, there was some really shady stuff shouldn't have counted, we should probably do it again, then that's a problem, right? Because then everybody's gonna be like, oh my goodness, no election ever is safe, everything's corrupt, everything is can't count anything. Then they're not gonna do that. Okay, in 2000 this happened, right? So I'm not gonna say it was fraudulent, but the vote was so close they had to go back through, look at ballots, and then like, oh, is this a hanging chad because it wasn't pushed all the way through? Does it count as a vote? Does it not count as a vote? And that was in Florida, right? Trying to determine between George W. Bush and Al Gore who won the election. It all came down to one state. And that's what a lot of stuff comes down to anymore anyway, is that you've got so many blue states, you've got so many red states. It's essentially 7 or 8 states that are electing the president, wherever they campaign. And people want to throw up the popular vote. It's like, well, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and Joe Biden won the popular vote by 10 million more people than had ever voted before, ever, in an election. But it is what it is. But the Republican candidate isn't going to go into New York State, isn't going to go into California and campaign hard to try and flip another, million votes when it won't matter in the long run, because they're not going to carry the state. Like, they can't flip enough to carry the state, so they're not going to waste money campaigning in those states. Whereas the Democrats going to be like, hey, we're going to win. Just, go ahead and vote for me anyway. Well, I'm going to win your state. And they just roll. So it's what the American election system's come to. And I don't think you want the popular vote determining the election anyway. I don't know. I mean, maybe in this day and age you could. I know when it was first founded you couldn't, just because of the sheer lack of communication and stuff amongst all of the areas. So kind of is what it is now, where we're using an old system, but that's fine. But I mentioned a lot of stuff in that video, and it got deleted. I appealed it. It did not pass the appeal process, and it didn't pass it in like 30 seconds. And I was like, what happened here? How is that an appeal? When I kind of laid out my argument. This isn't an opinion blog, it's an editorial type vlog. I'm just getting my thoughts down of what I observed, what I saw reported, and apparently that's not good enough. But it's weird, because like I very distinctly remember after 9/11 happened, and the U.S. went into Iraq, and you had these embedded reporters, boots on the ground, getting information. I remember distinctly one report because that was crazy right then when that happened. That you had people on the ground reporting live in a war. That they came across this area that had been essentially built during the night, right? It was just a concreted area, and like the locals were like, oh yeah, they had chemical stuff here, or weapons here, and then boom, the next day we have this patio, this concrete patio in the area, and it was very odd, but like that was the end of the reporting. Like it's like, oh look, there was nothing here, and then now all of a sudden there's this concrete area, and what's in it? Nobody knows. The end. It was like, well, are we gonna like x-ray scan it, or are we gonna like try to dig it up, or is this just you spouting off at the mouth because you're trying to make some type of leap, from a reporting standpoint? What happened here? Yeah, but that was just the end of it, and it seemed like nobody reported on any of that stuff. And the other thing, and I'll just talk about it real quick, but everybody makes a big deal about, well, there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but there was visual evidence that Saddam Hussein had used mustard gas against his own people, against a group that he didn't particularly like, but I mean they were still Iraqis, and I believe mustard gas is considered a weapon of mass destruction. It's not a nuclear weapon. It's not every weapon of mass destruction. It's not a nuke. So there you have that, and you had visual evidence he did it. So it's kind of like they were there, whether we found what we were looking for or not. I don't know. Heads needed to roll for 9/11, but essentially is what happened. We had to go fight somebody, even though it was a terrorist that wasn't under a particular country or flag. You have to fight somebody, and you can't just fight people that are embedded. I mean, eventually we did figure out that we could go to Afghanistan to fight people, but that ended horribly. So no real plan there. We were just going in to fight, and that was basically it. Anyway, the other parts of that video that got deleted, and I can't remember exactly what my state of mind was right then, but it had to do with girls basketball, because we were in girls basketball season, and I believe it was my daughter's freshman year. Yeah, she was a sophomore last year. That was 21. So, I mean, like I'm saying, this is 18 months ago that they're coming back on, saying I'm spreading misinformation for a video that, wasn't misinformation at the time. Like, if I'm saying a bunch of stuff now about the election or about COVID, then, yeah, flag the crap out of it. But right then, it wasn't really misinformation. It was just the information. It's what was out there. It was a stream of information that was out there. It was legitimate because, I think it was legitimate because I heard it from reporters, and then the data's there to look at. The actual voting data's there. I can't remember what the site was, but I did look it up after that video got struck down. It was a really neat site. If you just look it up, and it just kind of lays out each state, what the voting record was. Anyway, girls basketball. So I won't be able to remember exactly what happened, but I believe it was that her freshman year they played a team that made it to state last year. To follow up on the story, that team made it to state. So best team in the area by far. And when we played them out there her freshman year, and we didn't have any seniors on the team, they were beating us. It was either 24 or 26 to nothing after the first quarter. They had pressed the crap out of us. They had played as hard as they could play, and we could not make a shot. And That was the score. So we would have got beaten like 100-0 if they had played that hard the whole game. But their coach pulled the dogs off after the first quarter. It's like he let them play as hard as they could play for one quarter, and then that was it. And that's hard. If you're going to make a deep playoff run, if you're playing teams that aren't competitive with you, and I think earlier in the week they had beaten a team like 100-17 or something, or they scored over 100 and the other team scored like 17 or 19 points. Like just bad. Just beat them bad. And the other bad thing about that team was like they didn't have a bench. They only had 9 girls total. Like you'd think there would be all kinds of girls trying to ride that train, that wave of this good team that's going to win, conference championships and be in championship games, and they're going to come away with hardware, by being part of that team, and be part of a winning culture. Learn it. And it's, most of the time, I think these public schools around here now are free to pay, so it's not like it's pay for play. Then you get enough for maybe a JV school. They didn't have enough for JV, so like it was bad. And I think last year they did have enough, or maybe that year they did. I don't remember. Like it was so bad how bad we got beaten. Then like they wouldn't take the varsity players out until like the last 3 minutes of the game, like the good players. So, but that I can't remember exactly what state I was in. I think the coach had done something as well related to COVID, where he was going to be suspended, or he got suspended for a game, or he had to sit like on the bench with his mask on and couldn't take it off, or he was going to get fired. And like there was a big to do, and it's like, oh no, we can't let the coach get fired. And a lot of people went and kind of stuck up for the coach. It was like the girls liked the coach, but then like people didn't like the basketball, I guess. It's weird. Like that school's so weird when it comes to basketball and who they want coaching what. It's like if you didn't go there and play there, like you have zero chance to coach a team. Which, if you want to be competitive and stuff, like you need to get the best coach for whatever the job is. They're not willing to do it. But I don't remember exactly what that rant was, and I can't get back into the same frame of mind. I'm very disappointed that YouTube decided to do that. But that's the day and age that we're living in. So that's why I got to end it, is because I can't look over my shoulder. I can't go back over 120 videos and try to knock out the ones where I may have said something that gets flagged, because like I said, these were my opinions. This is what I was living through right at the time. And I talked about COVID, the election, the Olympics, the stuff going on with my mom, my job, how the kids were dealing with stuff in school. I think everything was fair game, at least from my standpoint. So if you made it this far in the series, congratulations. This is it. This is the last one. I will make one closing point with COVID, because the president just maybe not this past week, the weekend before, and I tried to record this once already, but I deleted it because I hadn't seen the thing yet, and I was just so upset. But I didn't want to say anything again. I don't think I've said anything controversial, but here goes. The COVID-19, the president said that the pandemic was over on 60 Minutes, and I think one thing I did say in that other video was that we had just elected the worst president ever in the history of the United States, and so far, after 2 years, he's pretty well borne that out. He's bad. He's a walking gaffe machine. His policies are terrible. Like inflation is as high as it's been in 40 years. They can't get a hold of it. We crossed the 1 million deaths barrier for COVID in March. No fanfare. not reported anywhere. Nobody said anything about it. Just, and before it was like a huge thing, especially during the election. It was like so many thousands of people had died, and we crossed the 1 million barrier, and like nobody said a word. And now it's well over 1 million. I think there's like just a couple hundred deaths a day that they're still attributing to COVID. But anyway, he said the pandemic was over, which was a huge gaffe. The drug companies are like, no, it's far from being over. Trust me, like we are still cranking out the drugs here, 100%. And if I think they'll look back in 10, 20 years maybe and look at how this pandemic was handled and be like, okay, if something like that happens again, we do not want to handle it like that at all. That was terrible. And it was. What happened to the kids in school, what happened to, people like mom and pop shops, barbers, people that kind of like independent small contractors, really got hosed because they were non-essential. So just the treatment of people, and I understand like the mentality to start with is like, hey, we don't know how bad this is going to be. Everybody's got to, stay separated, do their part. And it's like, okay, we did our part. And then it's like, okay, it's still going. So that didn't work, but nobody would say that stuff didn't work. And let's just go back to what we were doing. And, that there's too many other things that we're sacrificing to try and fix this. And then it's not fixing it. And we're still sacrificing the stuff. So you lose two ways, because one, you don't stop the spread of the disease. And then two, you hamstring yourself by shutting down businesses, by making kids stay away from school. And the worst example, or the most unfortunate example, that hit close to home was there was a girl cross-country runner who made it to state as a junior. So she ran, she was a sophomore when my son was a senior. And she was good. Like, I think she was like maybe winning a couple races that year. And then her junior year, a year into the pandemic, she had managed to make it to state. But her grades were like, she didn't want to do the school stuff. Like, I think during the summer leading up to cross country, she was struggling. She may not ran. I think she ran track as a sophomore, but junior year she didn't. And then because of grades, because of schoolwork, and she was trying to go and get treatment for OCD and anxiety and all these other things that were just playing havoc on her because of the deal that they had made out of this disease. You got to wash your hands, you got to do this, that, and the other. And she's like, well, I don't want to wash my hands because that'll knock. Like like her mindset was completely thrown off. And then you come around this year, so she didn't run track her junior year because she couldn't get the school stuff right, to count for her credits or whatever. And this summer she decides that she's just not going to run her senior year. She's still going to do like the independent studies and stuff and try to get this treatment and get over this mental lapse. But then you had a girl who was able to make state as a junior and can't even compete now as a senior. And, she sacrifices her senior year because all this other stuff has just played mind games with her for the whole time. It's terrible. And it's like, I tried to talk to her a couple of times. Well, once I tried to talk to her, and I was like, nah, just, you got to go out there, you got to do it. Let's, get out there and run. You're really good at it. You have a natural ability at this, and it just, ruined her. And it's, it's horrible and it's unfortunate because she's not going to be able to get that back. And I hope someday that she doesn't look back with regret. But I mean, it's just, the handling of it, when you see the effect on actual people, it's like, wow, this was terrible. This was terrible. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to say too much and end up saying something that I shouldn't. But I had COVID myself. I did not get vaccinated after I had the disease because it just doesn't make sense to me. And there's a lot of other people, did, going back to the beginning of it, I think they said if we got to 70%, we'd be at herd immunity between people who were infected and people who got the vaccine. We're well past that now. It's shown no signs of stopping anytime soon. It's endemic, and it's probably not going away. It's like the flu. There's going to be some version of it around all the time, and trying to vaccinate against something that doesn't exist is a fool's errand, in my opinion. But I mean, we'll see. I will not be giving my opinion on it, though, because this is it. So maybe I'll come back with another channel or something else, less controversial. But our president said the pandemic's over, so no more need for the vlog. We made it. Congratulations, everybody. I'm signing off. Be careful and be COVID-free. Later.